"You saw us bathing in the lake, now you have to marry us," said the three Apache Beauties. John was an anthropologist, which meant he studied people, their cultures, and the way they lived. He loved learning about traditions that were different from his own. When he heard about a remote area in the Southwest, where the Apache people had lived for generations, he knew he had to see it for himself. The journey to the Apache lands wasn't easy. John had to travel for hours on dusty roads, then hike through rocky trails, carrying his backpack, notebooks, and sketching materials. The sun was hot during the day, and at night the wind made strange, whistling sounds as it moved through the canyons. But John didn't mind. He loved the challenge, and he loved being surrounded by nature. The mountains, the desert, and the lakes all seemed magical to him, like a painting that changed every hour. After a long day of walking, John finally reached a small, hidden lake. The water was clear and calm, reflecting the blue sky above. He could see the green trees lining the shore, and he felt a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in a long time. He decided this would be the perfect place to set up camp for a few days. As he unpacked his gear, he noticed how quiet it was. There were no sounds of cars or buildings, just the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant calls of birds. John set up his small tent near the edge of the lake. He wanted to be close enough to study the area and maybe even meet some of the local people, but he also wanted to stay hidden, so he wouldn't disturb anyone. He took out his notebook and began sketching the landscape, drawing the way the sunlight fell on the water and how the shadows of the trees moved. He felt completely absorbed in his work, forgetting about the long hike and the tiredness in his legs. As the sun began to set, the lake turned gold and orange. John decided to take a walk along the shore. He loved the feeling of walking barefoot on soft sand, listening to the water lapping gently against the rocks. It felt like he was the only person in the world. But little did he know, he was not alone. Near the far side of the lake, hidden by a cluster of trees, three sisters were enjoying the water. They were daughters of a respected leader in the Apache community. The lake was a special place for them, a private spot where they could swim, laugh, and enjoy each other's company without anyone watching. Today, they had come to the lake early, carrying their simple baskets and blankets. They laughed as they splashed each other and enjoyed the warmth of the sun. It was their time to relax and feel free, away from the responsibilities of their family and community. John, unaware of anyone being there, continued his sketching and exploring. He didn't notice the rustle of leaves behind him or the shadow moving near the trees. He was too focused on capturing the beauty of the lake and the colors of the sunset. He moved closer to the water, kneeling to dip his hand in and feel the coolness. For John, it was a moment of wonder, a connection to nature that made him feel alive. The sisters, however, suddenly realized that someone had entered their private space. At first, they were shocked and embarrassed. No stranger had ever come so close to their lake without permission. They whispered to each other, wondering what to do. The youngest sister, who was always quick to speak, suggested that they confront him. The middle sister, more cautious, thought maybe they should watch him first. The oldest sister, who often took the lead, finally said that they had to make him understand the rules of their land. John, meanwhile, finally looked up from his sketching. That's when he saw them, three young women standing a few meters away, staring at him with expressions he couldn't quite read. He froze, feeling a sudden wave of awkwardness and guilt. He hadn't realized anyone was here. He had never intended to intrude. His mind raced as he tried to think of what to say, but before he could open his mouth, one of the sisters stepped forward. "You saw us bathing in the lake," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "Now you have to honor our custom." John blinked in confusion. He had studied many cultures, but this was entirely new to him. He didn't know what to say. The sisters watched him carefully, waiting for a reaction. They weren't angry, but they wanted him to understand that he had crossed a line, even if by accident. Feeling nervous, John took a step back and raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to intrude. I didn't know anyone was here." The sisters exchanged glances, then the oldest sister spoke again. "In our tradition, seeing someone in a private place has consequences, but we are not cruel. We will give you a chance to show respect, to prove that you are not here to harm us or our land." John's heart pounded. He wasn't sure what that meant, but he nodded, showing that he was willing to listen. He had learned in his studies that respect was always the first step to understanding a culture. He hoped that by showing humility, he could avoid offending them further. For the next few minutes there was a careful silence. John continued to kneel by the water, but now he was aware of the sisters' presence. He noticed the way they moved gracefully, the way they laughed quietly among themselves. He realized that this lake was more than just a place to swim. It was a sanctuary, a place of freedom and joy that belonged to them. He felt a mix of awe and respect. The sisters, in turn, began to see that John was not a threat. He seemed genuinely interested in learning, not in taking advantage of their privacy. The oldest sister finally smiled slightly. "You may stay," she said, "but you must follow our rules. Do not touch anything, do not speak unless spoken to, and always show respect for this place." John nodded eagerly, grateful for their permission. He promised himself that he would be careful and honor their customs. He also realized that this encounter was the beginning of something unexpected. He had come to the Southwest to study a culture, but he had never imagined that he would become personally involved in it so quickly. As the evening wore on, John set up his camp near the edge of the lake, careful not to disturb the sisters. He prepared a small fire and cooked a simple meal, all the while watching the sky turn dark and the stars appear one by one. The sisters had returned to their side of the lake, laughing quietly, and John felt a sense of wonder. He realized that this remote place held not just natural beauty, but also lessons about respect, humility, and the unexpected ways life could challenge him. That night, as John lay in his tent, he thought about the day's events. He reflected on the beauty of the lake, the grace of the sisters, and the delicate balance of nature and culture he had witnessed. He knew that his journey had taken a surprising turn. What had started as a simple exploration had now become a personal lesson in respect, patience, and understanding. John drifted off to sleep, feeling both nervous and excited about what the coming days might bring. The next morning, John woke up early. The first light of the sun turned the lake into a sheet of gold, and the birds' songs filled the air. He felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Last night's encounter with the three sisters had left him both amazed and confused. He had never experienced anything like this before. This was not just another study of culture. It felt personal, and he knew he had to approach it carefully. He quietly packed some of his sketching materials and decided to take a walk along the lake. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and the gentle waves made soft sounds against the shore. John hoped that by walking slowly and observing, he could better understand the place and perhaps even the people he had met. He didn't want to make any mistakes that could upset the sisters. As he walked, he noticed signs of life in the area. Small birds flitted among the branches, insects buzzed in the warm air, and the leaves on the trees shimmered with dew. John stopped often to take notes and sketch small details. Patterns of stones near the water, the way the sunlight hit certain leaves, and even the shapes of footprints along the sand. He was so absorbed in his work that he almost didn't notice movement in the trees across the lake. The three sisters had returned to the lake at dawn. They were more cautious than yesterday, but their curiosity about John was growing. They whispered to each other as they observed him, trying to understand who this stranger was and why he had come to their sacred place. The youngest sister, always quick to act, suggested that they confront him again, but the oldest sister reminded them to be patient. They decided to watch for a while, seeing how he behaved. John, unaware of their careful observation, continued his work near the edge of the water. He collected small stones, examined the plants, and even tried to identify the birds. He wanted to understand everything about the place, but he was careful not to approach the sisters' side of the lake. He felt a strange respect for the area, as if the lake itself was alive and had its own rules. After some time, one of the sisters finally stepped forward. She had long, dark hair that shone in the sunlight, and her eyes were sharp yet calm. "You are careful," she said, "but we need to know your heart. Why are you here?" John jumped slightly at the sound of her voice, but quickly bowed his head in respect. "I am here to learn," he said. "I study cultures, and I want to understand your people, your traditions, and the way you live. I mean no harm, and I promise to follow your rules." The sister studied him for a long moment. Then she motioned for him to sit down. John obeyed, careful not to make any sudden movements. The other two sisters emerged from behind the trees, still cautious but curious. They sat a few meters away, forming a small circle around him. John felt a mixture of nervousness and wonder. He had never been in a situation like this, where his presence alone could be judged so carefully. "You must understand something," the oldest sister said. "In our culture, privacy and respect are very important. Seeing someone in a place meant for us is serious. But we also value courage and honesty. You must prove that you are not here for selfish reasons. You must show respect for us and for our land." John nodded, understanding that this was not just a simple rule, but a test. "I will do my best," he said sincerely. "Please tell me what I need to do." The middle sister, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "There are tasks that will help us see your character. You will participate in small challenges that show patience, kindness, and understanding. Only then will we decide if we can trust you fully." John's heart raced. Challenges? He didn't know what kind of tasks they meant, but he knew he had to try. He realized that this was more than academic study. It was a chance to connect deeply with another culture, to learn not just through observation, but through experience. He felt both nervous and excited. The sisters first asked him to help clean a small area near the lake. It was simple work, picking up fallen branches and arranging stones along the shore, but it required care and attention. John bent down and carefully followed their instructions. He listened closely to every word, making sure to do exactly as they asked. The sisters watched silently, observing his patience and willingness to learn. Next, they asked him to help prepare a small meal using local ingredients. John had some knowledge of plants and herbs from his studies, but he had never cooked in this way before. The sisters guided him patiently, showing him which plants were safe and how to prepare them. John struggled at first, making mistakes, but he kept trying. The sisters smiled quietly, impressed by his determination and respect. After the meal, the sisters asked John to participate in a simple ritual of gratitude for the lake and the land. He felt a little awkward at first, but he followed their lead. He learned to bow, to speak softly, and to show appreciation for the water, the trees, and the sky. By the end, he felt a deep connection to the place, as if he were a small part of its beauty and mystery. Throughout the day, John began to notice the personalities of the sisters. The youngest was playful and curious, often making small jokes and testing him lightly. The middle sister was cautious and thoughtful, always observing his actions closely. The oldest sister was wise and patient, guiding the process with quiet authority. John realized that they were not just testing him, they were teaching him, helping him understand their world in a way that books and lectures never could. As the sun began to set, the sisters finally spoke together. "You have shown patience and respect today," said the oldest sister. "You are not perfect, but you are sincere. That is more important than perfection. We will continue to watch you, but you may stay near the lake and learn from us. You must always remember the rules." John bowed deeply, feeling both relief and gratitude. "Thank you," he said. "I will respect your rules always." That evening, as John prepared his small campfire, he reflected on the day. He realized that this encounter was changing him. He had come to study a culture, but he was learning about life, respect, and humility in ways he had never expected. The sisters had challenged him, and in facing that challenge, he had grown. He felt a sense of connection not just to the lake, but to the people who cared for it. He also understood that this was only the beginning. The sisters had given him a chance, but the journey ahead would require courage, patience, and honesty. He knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, and he felt ready to face them. As he looked at the stars reflecting in the calm water of the lake, John felt a quiet excitement. He was no longer just a visitor. He was a part of a story that was unfolding, a story he could never have imagined when he first set out on his journey. John fell asleep that night with a sense of wonder. He dreamed of the lake, the sisters, and the lessons he was learning. He felt that this experience was teaching him something far more valuable than any book or lecture ever could. He was learning about respect, trust, and the delicate balance between curiosity and humility. And he knew that the days to come would be filled with more surprises, challenges, and lessons that would shape him forever. The morning sun rose slowly over the lake, casting long golden rays across the water. John woke feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Yesterday had been a day full of lessons, small challenges, and unexpected discoveries. He had proven a little of his sincerity and patience, yet he knew that gaining the full trust of the three sisters would not be easy. Today he would face new trials, and he felt a deep curiosity about what they might involve. As John stepped outside his small tent, He noticed the sisters already near the lake. The youngest was skipping along the shore, her laughter echoing in the quiet morning air. The middle sister sat on a flat rock, her eyes observing John closely, as if weighing every thought and action. The oldest sister, standing tall and composed, called him over with a gentle hand gesture. John approached slowly, careful not to show any fear or hesitation. He felt both admiration and a quiet nervousness as he looked at them. "You have learned patience," said the oldest sister. "But to understand us, you must also show courage, humility, and wisdom. Today you will face challenges that test your heart, not just your hands." John listened intently, nodding. He understood that these challenges were not just about proving himself. They were lessons in living, respect, and understanding a culture different from his own. He felt a growing excitement. He had traveled far to study people, but he had never imagined that the lessons would be so personal and immediate. The first task was simple in appearance but difficult in execution. The sisters asked John to cross a narrow path along the edge of the lake while balancing a small basket filled with stones. "This is a test of focus," said the middle sister. "If you are careless, the stones will fall. If you lose patience, you will fail." John carefully lifted the basket, feeling the weight in his hands. He began to step along the narrow path, his eyes focused on the trail, his arms steady. The youngest sister followed closely, teasing him lightly but not offering help. The middle sister watched silently, and the oldest sister observed from a distance. John's heart raced, but he forced himself to breathe steadily. One misstep and the stones could spill into the water. Yet he moved slowly and carefully, and after several tense minutes he reached the other side without dropping a single stone. The sisters smiled, quietly approving his effort. The next challenge was more physical. The sisters asked him to climb a small hill nearby, which had uneven rocks and steep patches. "This is a test of courage and persistence," the oldest sister explained. "You must reach the top without giving up, and you must do it with respect for the land." John felt the strain in his legs as he began the climb. The rocks were slippery in places, and he had to pause several times to catch his breath. Yet, he noticed how careful he was being, not just for his safety, but also to avoid disturbing the natural beauty around him. He thought about the sisters, about their traditions, and about how every step mattered. The climb was slow, exhausting, and sometimes discouraging, but he kept moving. At last, he reached the top, breathing heavily but smiling with a quiet sense of triumph. The sisters watched him from below, nodding with approval. "You have courage," said the middle sister, "but courage alone is not enough. You must also show respect for others and the ability to listen and understand." The next task was more delicate. The sisters asked John to help them collect herbs and plants along the shore. He had some knowledge from his studies, but he needed to follow their guidance carefully. The youngest sister explained how each plant had a special meaning and use, and why it was important to take only what was necessary. John bent down to examine the plants, gently picking them and arranging them in the basket. He noticed how the sisters moved through the area with ease, touching nothing unnecessarily and showing gratitude for everything around them. As he worked, the youngest sister asked him questions about his life, his family, and his reasons for traveling. John answered honestly, sharing stories about his studies and his love for learning about different cultures. The sisters listened closely, occasionally smiling or nodding. John began to feel a connection growing between them, a quiet bond formed through respect and shared experience. After gathering the herbs, the sisters asked John to help prepare a small area for a ceremonial fire. This task required focus, care, and thoughtfulness. He had to arrange stones in a circle, clear dry leaves and twigs, and ensure that the fire would be safe. The sisters watched him carefully, guiding him only when necessary. John felt a sense of responsibility, understanding that even small actions could show his character. He worked patiently, making sure everything was in order. Finally, the sisters presented him with the last task for the day. They asked him to participate in a ritual of storytelling. Each of them told a short story about their family, the lake, and the traditions of their people. John listened quietly, absorbing every word, every pause, and every emotion in their voices. When it was his turn, he shared a story from his own life, not about travel or study, but about a moment when he had learned respect and humility. He spoke with honesty, careful not to exaggerate or boast. The sisters listened intently, their expressions thoughtful. When he finished, the oldest sister spoke. "You have done well today," she said. "You have shown courage, patience, respect, and honesty. You are beginning to understand the heart of our culture." John felt relief and pride, but also a deeper sense of humility. He realized that this experience was not just about winning approval. It was about learning, understanding, and connecting. He had thought he was here to observe a culture, but now he understood that he was part of it, at least for this moment in time. As the sun began to set, the sisters invited John to sit with them near the ceremonial fire. They shared simple food and talked quietly, laughing softly at small jokes and stories. John felt a warmth in his heart that went beyond physical comfort. He felt included, respected, and part of something meaningful. The sisters had tested him, yes, but they had also welcomed him, showing him the depth of their culture in ways that no book or lecture could. That night, John sat by his own small fire, reflecting on the day. He thought about the challenges, the lessons, and the moments of connection he had experienced. He realized that he had changed in subtle but important ways. He was more patient, more aware of his surroundings, and more respectful of the people and places he encountered. The sisters had not only tested him, they had taught him. He also began to notice the differences between himself and the sisters. They lived in a world shaped by tradition, respect for nature, and strong bonds of family and community. John came from a world focused on knowledge, research, and exploration. But he saw now that learning was not only about books or experiments. It was about understanding people, their values, and their way of life. As he lay down to sleep, the stars reflected in the lake like tiny jewels. John felt a mixture of excitement and uncertainty about the days ahead. The sisters had given him opportunities, tested his character, and shown him the beauty of their world. But he knew that the journey was far from over. There were still lessons to learn, challenges to face, and connections to deepen. Yet John also felt a quiet confidence. He had proven that he could respect their rules, participate in their traditions, and approach each challenge with sincerity. He understood now that respect, humility, and courage were not abstract ideas. They were actions, demonstrated in small, meaningful ways. He knew that if he continued on this path, he might earn not only the trust of the sisters, but also a deeper understanding of life itself. With these thoughts in mind, John drifted into a peaceful sleep, feeling both tired and fulfilled. The lake remained calm under the starlight, and the sisters watched from a distance, their eyes reflecting quiet approval. For John, this was the turning point of his journey, the moment when observation became participation, curiosity became respect, and a stranger became part of a living, breathing story. The morning came quietly over the lake, but for John, it was a morning of reflection and anticipation. He had spent several days learning from the three sisters, participating in their tasks, and observing their traditions. Each day brought new lessons and challenges, but today felt different. There was a sense of importance in the air, as if the sisters were preparing him for something more serious, a deeper test of character and understanding. John packed his small bag with the essentials he always carried, his notebook, pencils, and a few personal items. He felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The previous days had been filled with small tasks and rituals, each designed to teach him patience, respect, and humility. Now he sensed that the lessons were becoming more personal, testing not only his skills but also his emotions and values. As he walked toward the lake, he noticed the three sisters waiting for him near the edge. They had already prepared a small area for a new challenge, arranging stones, sticks, and some natural objects in careful patterns. The youngest sister smiled at him warmly, though her eyes carried a glimmer of mischief. The middle sister's gaze was thoughtful, as if she were carefully measuring every movement he made. The oldest sister stood tall and composed, her expression calm but serious, radiating quiet authority. "You have learned patience, courage, and respect," said the oldest sister. "But now you will face the consequences of your actions and the choices you make. You are not just a visitor anymore. You are part of this place, and your decisions will affect both yourself and those around you." John listened closely, nodding. He realized that this challenge would be different from the previous ones. It would not be about physical skill or simple tasks. It would test his heart, his integrity, and his ability to handle unexpected situations. He felt a mixture of fear and excitement, knowing that the outcome could change everything about his journey. The first part of the day's challenge involved working with the local environment in a way that required both intelligence and respect. The sisters asked John to help construct a small shelter using natural materials from the surroundings. It was not a test of strength alone, but of observation, creativity, and understanding of the land. John began gathering sticks, leaves, and stones, carefully arranging them under the watchful eyes of the sisters. As he worked, the sisters observed his approach. The youngest sister whispered questions to him, testing his understanding of the environment and the importance of balance in nature. The middle sister corrected him gently when he made small mistakes, showing him how to move carefully without harming the plants or disturbing the animals. The oldest sister offered guidance only when absolutely necessary, allowing John to learn through trial, patience, and observation. By the afternoon, the small shelter began to take shape. John realized that the task was not just about building a structure, but about learning patience, precision, and respect for every detail of the environment. He felt a sense of pride in his accomplishment, but he also understood that this was just the beginning of today's lessons. Next, the sisters introduced a challenge that tested his emotional strength. They asked him to sit quietly near the lake with no distractions and observe the natural world. At first, John found it difficult. He was used to thinking, writing, or moving constantly, but now he was asked to simply be, listening to the water, watching the movement of the birds, and noticing the smallest details of nature. Minutes passed slowly, then hours. John began to feel a deep connection to the lake and its surroundings. He noticed the gentle ripple of the water, the rustling of leaves, and the distant sound of a bird's song. In that quiet, he reflected on his own life, his motivations, and his place in the world. For the first time, he understood that true understanding required patience and observation, not just action. The sisters returned after some time. "You have observed," said the middle sister. "But observation alone is not enough. You must also act with compassion and wisdom. Your choices affect not just you, but those around you." John nodded, sensing the meaning behind her words. The final challenge of the day was the most personal yet. The sisters asked him to make a choice that required integrity and honesty. They presented a situation in which he could easily take a shortcut to gain recognition or advantage, but doing so would be dishonest and disrespectful. John's heart raced as he considered his options. He thought about the lessons he had learned: patience, courage, respect, observation, and honesty. He realized that the right choice was clear, even if it was difficult. Carefully, he followed the path of integrity, completing the task honestly and without cutting corners. The sisters watched closely, their expressions calm but expectant, waiting for him to prove his sincerity. When he finished, the sisters spoke together. "You have faced challenges that test your heart, mind, and spirit," said the oldest sister. "You have made choices with honesty and respect, showing that you are sincere in your intentions. But there is still more to learn. The consequences of your actions are not over, and the lessons of life continue to unfold." John felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. He had completed the tasks, but he understood that the true lessons were ongoing. He was learning not just about the sisters or the lake, but about life itself. The responsibility of actions, the importance of respect, and the value of patience and honesty. As the sun began to set, the sisters invited John to sit with them by a small fire. They shared food and quiet conversation, speaking about their family, the land, and the importance of traditions. John listened carefully, absorbing every word. He felt a growing admiration for the sisters, not just for their beauty, but for their wisdom, courage, and strength of character. During the conversation, John realized that the challenges he had faced were more than tests. They were opportunities to grow, to understand the world in a deeper way. He thought about his own culture, his studies, and the way he had approached life before arriving at the lake. He saw now that knowledge was not just in books or lectures, but in experience, observation, and connection with others. The sisters noticed his reflection and smiled quietly. They had guided him through tests that were not just physical or mental, but moral and emotional. They had seen him struggle, learn, and grow, and they had begun to trust him, not just as a visitor, but as someone who could understand and respect their world. Night fell, and the lake became calm and silent under the stars. John sat by his own small fire, thinking about the lessons he had learned and the experiences he had faced. He realized that the journey was far from over. There were still more challenges ahead, more lessons to learn, and more opportunities to grow. But he also felt a quiet confidence. He had proven that he could act with integrity, respect, and sincerity, and he knew that these qualities would guide him in the days to come. As he drifted to sleep, John felt a sense of peace and anticipation. He knew that the experiences at the lake would stay with him forever, shaping the way he thought, acted, and understood the world. The sisters had not only taught him about their culture, they had shown him the importance of humility, patience, and respect in every action. And so, under the quiet stars and the gentle rustle of the trees, John's journey continued. The challenges of the day had been met, but the story was far from over. He understood now that every action, every choice, and every moment carried meaning. The lake, the sisters, and the lessons they shared were more than a temporary encounter. They were a guiding force, shaping him in ways he could never have imagined. The morning at the lake dawned quietly, with soft rays of sunlight reflecting off the water. John woke with a sense of calm and understanding. The days he had spent learning from the three sisters had changed him in ways he had never imagined. He felt stronger, more aware, and more connected to the world around him. He knew that today would mark the conclusion of his lessons at the lake, but he also sensed that the true impact of this experience would stay with him forever. As he stepped out of his small tent, he saw the sisters waiting near the water. They looked calm and serene, their presence commanding and gentle at the same time. The youngest sister smiled at him warmly, the middle sister's eyes showed quiet thoughtfulness, and the oldest sister radiated wisdom and patience. They had guided him through many challenges, tests of courage, patience, and respect. Today, they would help him reflect on everything he had learned. "You have faced every challenge with sincerity and respect," said the oldest sister. "You have shown courage, patience, honesty, and understanding. But the lessons of life are not always complete in one place. You must carry what you have learned into the world beyond this lake." John nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had learned much more than he expected, not only about the culture of the sisters and their traditions, but also about himself. He had learned humility, the value of careful observation, and the importance of respect in every action. He realized that these lessons were not temporary, they were tools for living a better, wiser life. The sisters then asked him to spend the morning reflecting near the lake. He walked slowly along the shore, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the first day when he had accidentally stumbled upon the sisters bathing. At the time, he had been embarrassed and nervous, unsure of what to do. Now he understood that the encounter had been the start of something much greater, a journey of learning, growth, and connection. As he walked, he noticed how deeply he had changed. He had learned to be patient, to move carefully and deliberately, and to observe the world with care and attention. He had learned to listen without interrupting, to act without harming, and to approach new experiences with humility and respect. Each task, each challenge, each conversation with the sisters had taught him something important, and he felt a quiet gratitude for their guidance. Around midday, the sisters invited John to sit with them near the water. They shared simple food, laughing quietly at small stories from their family and community. John listened intently, absorbing every detail. He realized that this connection, this sharing of life and culture, was more valuable than any book, lecture, or research paper. He felt included in their world, not as an outsider, but as a participant who had earned their trust through sincerity and respect. The oldest sister spoke again. "You have learned many lessons, but there is one more. True understanding comes not only from learning what is right, but from knowing how to carry it forward. The world beyond this lake will test you in ways different from here. You must remember everything you have learned and apply it wherever life takes you." John nodded, understanding the depth of her words. He felt a sense of readiness. The lake had been a place of challenge, growth, and reflection, but now he was prepared to carry those lessons into the wider world. He thought about the sisters, their patience, their wisdom, and their guidance. He felt a deep respect and admiration for them, knowing that their teachings would remain with him forever. As the afternoon passed, John spent more time with the sisters, helping them gather small items from the lake and prepare the area for the evening. Each action was performed with care, respect, and attention, reflecting the lessons he had learned. The youngest sister laughed and teased him gently, the middle sister observed quietly, and the oldest sister guided with calm authority. John felt a sense of belonging, knowing that he had grown close to these remarkable women through mutual respect and understanding. When the sun began to set, painting the lake in shades of gold and pink, the sisters asked John to sit quietly with them one last time. The water was calm, reflecting the sky like a mirror. John felt a sense of peace, knowing that he had completed this chapter of his journey. The sisters spoke softly about the importance of life, respect, and kindness. They reminded him that the lessons he had learned at the lake were not just for this place, but for every place and every person he would encounter in the future. "You have shown sincerity, courage, patience, and respect," said the oldest sister. "These qualities will guide you in life. Remember them always, and you will find the path even when it seems unclear. The lake, the land, and our stories will stay with you, but it is how you live these lessons that matters most." John felt a deep sense of gratitude. He realized that his journey had not been about research alone. It had been about understanding life, respecting others, and growing as a person. He thought about the challenges, the tasks, and the conversations with the sisters. He remembered the moments of struggle, the times he felt unsure, and the moments of success and connection. Each one had shaped him, teaching him lessons he could never forget. As night fell, John prepared to leave the lake. The stars reflected in the water, and the gentle sounds of nature surrounded him. He packed his belongings carefully, making sure to leave the area as untouched and respected as he had found it. The sisters stood by the water's edge, watching him with quiet pride and approval. "You are ready to go," said the oldest sister. "Carry what you have learned with respect and honesty. Your journey continues beyond this lake, but you will always be connected to it through the lessons and experiences you have had here." John bowed deeply, feeling a mix of gratitude, respect, and affection. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I will never forget what I have learned here, and I will carry it with me always." The youngest sister smiled warmly. "Remember to be kind, patient, and brave," she said. "These things will guide you more than anything else." The middle sister nodded quietly. "And remember respect," she added, "for others, for the land, and for every small action. It matters more than you realize." John felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had come to the lake to learn about a culture, but he was leaving with far more than knowledge. He was leaving with understanding, respect, and a sense of connection that went beyond words. He felt that the lake, the sisters, and the lessons he had learned would remain with him forever, shaping his actions and choices for the rest of his life. As he walked away from the lake, the sisters watched him go. They knew that he had learned what they had hoped to teach, not just knowledge, but wisdom. They smiled quietly, knowing that the lake had fulfilled its purpose in shaping him, and that he would carry its lessons into the world beyond. John walked along the path that led away from the lake, thinking about everything that had happened. He thought about the first day, when he had stumbled upon the sisters bathing, and how that accidental moment had led to an experience that changed him forever. He realized that life was full of unexpected moments, and that the way he responded to them, with respect, patience, and sincerity, would define his journey. By the time he reached the main trail leading back to civilization, John felt a deep sense of calm. The lake was behind him, but its lessons were etched in his mind. He knew that he had grown as a person, and that the experiences he had shared with the sisters would influence every step of his life. He felt gratitude, not just for the knowledge he had gained, but for the people who had guided him so patiently and wisely. As he looked back one last time, the lake shimmered in the fading light of the sun. He could see the silhouettes of the sisters standing by the water, watching him with quiet approval. John smiled softly, feeling a connection that went beyond words. He knew that he had not just learned about a culture. He had learned about life, respect, and the power of sincerity and understanding. Walking away from the lake, John felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He knew that the lessons he had learned would guide him in every choice he made, every action he took, and every person he met. The journey had begun with curiosity, but it had ended with wisdom, humility, and a deep respect for life in all its forms. And so, under the quiet stars and the gentle whisper of the wind through the trees, John left the lake behind, carrying with him not just memories, but a life-changing understanding of courage, patience, respect, and connection. The lake, the sisters, and the lessons they shared had become part of him forever, shaping the person he would become and the life he would lead.